Hello, and welcome back to A Better World. This is your host, Mitchell Rabin, and I'm very glad you're joining us again today. Today, we're going to have another very interesting and important show. I have invited back Duane Elgin, and this time his lovely wife, Colleen Elgin, filmmaker, to talk about their latest work, a book that Duane wrote called Choosing Earth. And I'm first going to tell you a little bit about them both. And then we're going to go headlong into discussing the fundamental tenets of the book and also show you a clip of the film that Colleen made based on this particular subject, which is tantamount and salient for honestly all of our lives. And that'll get fleshed out as the interview goes on. So a few words about Duane. Duane has an extraordinary background, actually. Social scientist, 2 years on the senior staff of a presidential commission, President Nixon, on the American future, 6 years working as a senior social scientist with the Futures Group at SRI International, where he conducted research on the deep future for the National Science Foundation, the President's Science Advisor, the Environmental Protection Agency, and more. Duane is also the author of some 5 books that look into the deep future, looking at different aspects of that future for us all to sort of, you could say, prepare for. And so it's really a pleasure to have Duane back on A Better World. His wife, Colleen Elgin, will be joining us again today. Well, for the first time, actually, today, filmmaker. She develops and leads educational programs and media that explore our time of great transition. She's produced, directed, and co-wrote the documentary film, Facing Adversity and Choosing Earth, Choosing Life, which you'll be seeing a little bit of. For over 15 years, her documentary work, both short and long form, has focused on pioneers of consciousness and spiritual growth. Examples are Science and Sacraments, Psychedelics Research and Mystical Experience, The Way of the Shaman, the work of Michael and Sandra Harner, and videos for the John E. Fetzer Memorial Trust, including John E. Fetzer Retrospective. So it's really a pleasure to have both of these lovely people on today that are shaking our world down to the roots, quite honestly. And in a way that I will also say we need. We need to see what's really going on, to really grok it, if you will, to be a little science fictional about it, but right back to Earth, then showing us where we go from here to make a difference in our world and to turn things around. So, Duane, Colleen, a pleasure to have you both.
Thank you, Mitchell.
Thank you, Mitchell.
Really good to be here with you.
Yeah, great to be here.
I'm so glad.
An old friend.
Yes, indeed.
Yes.
We require old friendship to move this world forward.
Indeed. Really. I mean, that's the foundation right there. We require old friendships, new friendships. We require community. This is a core theme for Colleen. In a way, that's where we end, is where we're beginning right now. Is with community.
I think that's really a very good point. We sort of begin and end with community. It's and if you want to get kind of biological about it, that's the way we've survived. I really like telling people it's through community, through clan, through tribe, through storytelling, actually, and the building of oxytocin through love of the community that we were able to deal with predators.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well said, Mitchell. Well, let's dive in.
Let's dive in. You have much to share with us, Duane, and then we're delighted, Colleen, to see a clip of the video, and that will be a pre-staging for others to come and tune in at greater length. So,
Great.
Duane, your book is thorough, it's critical, it's deep. Take us through what you feel are the primary tenets that you would like people to know about.
Okay. Let me start by a bit of diagnosis. How do we look at this in the first place? What is happening in the world? Because the world has never gone through a time of transition of planetary scale that involves all of us, and not just the humans, but the other forms of life that inhabit the world as well. And so to make it as simple as possible, we bring three perspectives to this inquiry: wide, deep, and long. We bring a wide perspective. We say it's more than just climate change. So many people are focusing on the emergency of climate change. That's very important, but it's not the whole story. We also have profound, a mass extinction underway right now of species around the Earth. We're running out of water. The groundwater is being pumped dry around the Earth, and so farming and the ability to feed ourselves is being compromised. If we will look a bit wider and see the drought emerging around the planet, there's profound, severe inequities of well-being, and this has to be factored into the pathway ahead. So the point is, there are many more, but we need to look wide beyond single issues. We need to look deep beneath the surface of material changes, a new solar panel on the roof, a new electric car, and so on. That's great, but we need to look even deeper than that, to the changing values, the changing mindsets, the changing consciousness, the changing paradigm of how we look at reality itself and our place in it. Then we need to look long. Typically, people are looking maybe 2 years in advance if it's the big corporations, maybe 5 to 10 years in advance, some academics. We're looking 50 years into the future. And if you put these three together, look wide, look deep, look long, it changes how you see things. We don't have to impose upon people. Just the looking itself is transformative. So that's a good kind of prelude, I think, to the wonderful work Colleen has done with her filmmaking, her documentary. And it provides it's a 70-minute documentary where it's going to look at a very brief minute-and-a-half clip, but it helps set the stage for looking into this further future and our time of transition.
That's wonderful. That's a great intro, Duane. Thank you. It sets the frame of how we are being invited by you to conceive of what we have before us.
Yeah.
So we need to have those different parameters,
yes.
The X, Y, and Z axis.
Yes.
Well,
that's right.
Great. So let's take a look at this short clip. Oops, actually I gotta go to screen share. Here we go. And
great turning, which is what? It's a transition we're in. We're in it now. It's a transition. We're learning so much in science and in grassroots community building. It's not something we do instead of the collapse. It's something that can guide us through. My preposition these days is through. Honey, we're going to have to go through this.
The opportunity of this time is for us to evaluate and reassess our priorities as a species. We need to look at what our relationships are to each other, to our families, to our community, and really assess our values.
We've arrived at a species level conversation, our species, and we need to own this to find a path forward.
We have entered an extraordinarily rare moment in humanity's collective journey. The path for generations to come will depend on people alive today. We cannot predict where humanity will go from here for one simple reason. Our future...
darn, stop. Oh, well, I'm sorry.
I think we can finish that. Our future depends on it.
And depends on our individual and collective consciousness. That's actually what Duane was going to say.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really a good framing for the film, is that we are definitely in a very challenging situation on the planet. And the answer to it isn't a simple solution. It's actually the deeper changes, as Duane pointed to. So with this documentary, we tried to bring together the why to give people a sense, because really it's kind of like growing muscles. Humanity, to work with what's happening now, we've got to grow into, and develop kind of further skills, further muscle, so to speak, to open to our collective dimensions, and to care about the whole planet, not just where we are, but really take it in. And so we in the film, we explore those wide dimensions that Duane mentioned. And then we turn to kind of, in a sense, wisdom elders, and they speak to the challenge, but also point out that really what's at the core is this change in consciousness, and also it's a profound shift from our individual separate selves into really recognizing and caring for all life on the planet. And that includes human life too. So all species, and making that a priority. The care for, the restoration, the regeneration of life. So that is, in a nutshell, what the film is looking at. And what we have found is that most people have pieces of that, but they don't have it all together. And so in our film talkbacks, there are some people that are very knowledgeable, and for them, it's not that new. And that's a very small percentage, but they're out there. They've been studying it, they know what's happening. But for most people at the film talkbacks, they say, I haven't seen it pulled together quite like that. Mm-hmm. Both seeing the challenges, but then looking deeply through the eyes of the different elders, what is at the core of this, and having that expressed and, in a sense, mirrored back to us. So in a way, you could say the film is a global social witnessing. It's a way to see together and have more of us, as we view it, see that. That's the purpose of it, the first step, as Duane has said, is, it's awareness. As we step into awareness, then we can begin the next steps. But first we have to recognize where we're at right now. And so that's really the purpose.
That's well put. That's well put, Colleen. I'm thinking, as you're speaking, of the famous line from Albert Einstein and your reference to that there isn't a simple solution, except for, if you want to call the shifting of and the elevating of consciousness a simple solution. And that is the phrase, the sentence that you cannot change a problem on the level on which it was created.
That's right.
i.e., you have to step it up and have a meta position, as we say in neurolinguistic programming. You have to have a higher dimensional perspective that will allow you to see, from the 30,000 viewpoint, what's there to grok, like a gestalt. Yeah. That's how I kind of see what the work you both have done. It's the pieces of a puzzle that finally, with the last piece, voila, there it is, Duane, would you talk a little bit about, you said it's not just climate change. By the way, I have to say that Paul Hawken, in an interview I did with him some time ago on his book Drawdown, corrected me because I used the phrase climate change. And he said, well, and I'm paraphrasing, climate's always changing. So that's not really precise. What's going on now is anthropogenic global warming. Mm-hmm. And global, that's the issue that we're facing. And for some reason, the media has decided that's not a sexy enough name, but climate change is. But it's an inaccurate programming that's taking place because, it's, what is that old Broadway show, Anthony Newley, Stop the World, I Want to Get Off. It doesn't go that way. You're not going to ever stop climate change, nor would you want to. But global warming, anthropogenic, that's another conversation. So would you pick that up? And
Sure. Let me throw in another famous quote. And this is from Ted Turner. Ted Turner once said to me, Duane, a problem recognized is a problem half solved. Now, do we actually recognize the problem that we're facing so we can actually solve it? And so in a way, that's what we're doing, looking wide, deep, and long, and say, wait, let's look at the full dimensions of this challenge that we're facing. Now, in addition, later in the program, hopefully, we'll look at another aspect of Ted Turner's quote, that a problem recognized or an opportunity recognized is an opportunity half realized. Can we recognize the opportunities here so we can realize them? So that's an integral part of the work that we're doing. Not just the difficulty, but also the opportunity. So let's go back to the beginning, what you raised, climate, not change, but climate transformation, actually. And here's how it's being framed now to put it into its most clear terms, in my estimation. For the last 100,000 years or so, carbon dioxide has not gone over 278 parts per million in the atmosphere. And we've had periods of warming and cooling, and so on. It's never gone over 278. Now, this is like taking a thermometer to the planet. It's never gone over 278. And Bill McKibben comes along and say, we must stop it at 350. We haven't. But going beyond 350 was moving then into the danger zone. You can stay at 278, a lot's going to happen, but if you go over through 50, it's into the danger zone. We're now at 420 parts per million. And the understanding is if we get to 450, it goes beyond the danger zone to the catastrophe zone. And the point is, with that simple measure, danger between 350 parts and 450, that's the danger zone. We're at 420, ready to go over that. That's going into the catastrophe zone fast. So this is urgent. This is, people like, well, technology will do this, it will do that. No, we are in an urgent situation. And the magnitude of that urgency is global, it's planetary. And it just isn't planetary for humans, it's urgent for the well-being of all life in the oceans and on the land and so on. We could speak at length about that. I won't. But I do want to say the problem is of that magnitude and that urgency.
All the way from the smallest amoeba and algae to the most sophisticated organism on land.
That's right.
That's right.
That's right. So that's
all sentient life.
Yes.
Yeah.
So there's setting the frame for the conversation. And do you have anything you want to add?
Do you want to add about the temperature, 1 degrees, either
go
way?
ahead.
Well, the other piece that goes with that really affects life on the planet is that for thousands of years, hundreds of thousands, we had a temperature that was very rough. It would go, from mini ice ages to very hot times. And about 10,000 years ago, the temperature stabilized. And that's what the modern world is based on. We basically have about a 1 degree Celsius going, a little narrow pathway. And that has created the world that we all enjoy and all of life on this planet enjoys. Well, we're now at risk of sending it back to what it was prior to that time. And that is just terrifying. You cannot grow food in a modern world. You cannot have the diversity of plants and animals if the temperature is, if we're soaring into completely different climate stages, from extreme colds to extreme hots.
What defines extreme heat or extreme cold from that larger, longer historical perspective?
Well, it would be, let's say a person, their temperature goes from 98.8 or whatever, and it starts going up to 102, 103, 4, and then you're moving into the danger zone of brain death. If you get up over sustained 104 degrees temperature, get up to 106, you're a goner. Now, what we're doing to the Earth is equivalent for the human being to go above 104 degrees. You're going beyond the danger zone into the catastrophe zone if it's sustained. And indeed, we are moving into a sustained high temperature world. And if it goes beyond 420 to 450, it's catastrophe. The planet will be uninhabitable by a majority of life forms. It will be radically changed that much, a mass extinction. So I don't want to belabor that, but that is, we're on the verge of an uninhabitable future.
And most people don't recognize it. That's the key thing. They know there's a challenge, but what they're not recognizing is how close we are to an extremely dangerous situation that we do need to act now, actually.
So we have a window of opportunity here. Let's get clear. Let's be mature citizens of the earth in understanding that window of opportunity. Right. So then if we start looking ahead and say, well, what's going to unfold here? Well, then we have been speaking about three futures as we go out and talk with people around the world. And Colleen has some video to help clarify or illustrate those futures.
Excellent.
And let me just summarize them. The three futures summarizing are one is a future of chaos and collapse. The other is a future of authoritarianism that emerges strongly as a planetary phenomenon, and it's emerging now. And the third future is one of what I call freedom. It's the freedom future, where we're not, if we're in a future.
I like that one.
Yeah, if we're in a future, think about it, of collapse and chaos, there's the constraint. There's not enough food, there's conflict. We're really going to be constrained. There's not a lot of freedom in that future.
A surveillance state.
Yeah. Well, the authoritarian future then is one of where there's deliberate control of people to prevent them from acting in a way their freedom might upset the world. And the third future, that of self-organizing mature individuals on a planetary scale, we say, okay, we'll do this ourselves. We can handle this ourselves. There's freedom in that. So let's take a quick look at each of these three futures. First of all, the future of crash and collapse. So it begins with a great unraveling. That's happening right now. The unraveling then moves into what we call the great fall. If it's unraveling, it can't hold itself together. If it can't hold itself together, it falls. The great fall of institutions and ecosystems around the earth produces a time of great sorrow. And the great sorrow then leads to surrender and a time of global collapse. The great collapse into a configuration that I just mentioned. The earth is no longer habitable. So that is one real pathway that's developing right now, because we are going into a time of unraveling in the 20s. We are expected, if we continue along, to go into a great fall in the 30s, the great sorrow in the 40s, and so on. So let's look at the second pathway. That's the authoritarian pathway with artificial intelligence and biotechnology as well. It begins the same as the first did, with a great unraveling, a great fall. And at that time, as we're falling apart, there are other forces that are saying, let's clamp down on this, let's pull it together, let's prevent the time of great sorrow from fully manifesting. That's the huge die-off of people and other species. And so the great sorrow then results in a pullback, preventing us from hitting the evolutionary wall, and instead it moves into a great dictatorship of the entire Earth.
You want to mention the yellow arrows?
Go ahead.
And the yellow arrows from the left are really all of us, the movement that's trying to make the change. And in the first one we saw and this one, it's not enough. So there's not enough movement and not enough of a shift. And so it's overtaken by the other forces. But if we go along here to the next one.
So it's uplift is very important here. Where's the uplift? So once again, then the yellow arrows.
So in this one, it's the yellow arrows coming from the left is the uplift that mixes as we're coming down into the fall and helps support a lift into a different future. So
and that looks like it's coinciding in the 2040s.
Yes. So what I would expect, unless we choose otherwise, and we do have choice, choose the earth, choose it or lose it. Okay. I do see a time of unraveling and a great fall moving toward a great sorrow, time of great sorrow. On all three, they're all three collapsing at the outset. The question is, once we see that is what is happening, what are we going to do about it? We've had an opportunity already to, over the last 50 years, to anticipate what's happening right now. Mm-hmm. But let's say we continue along. There is the unraveling through the 20s. It falls apart in the 30s. And then we see this is really, really serious. We're going to have to step up here as mature citizens of an injured earth. And the sorrow then becomes a catalyst for action, for change, for pulling together as a human family, for the community that we spoke about at the outset. And with that, there is a time of collective awakening and collective healing of the earth. And we're choosing the earth as our long-term home for the future. And that is a pathway that can emerge realistically in my estimation.
And back here, again, in the 2020s, where the lift is, the yellow areas, the arrows, the movement happening now for consciousness change, for growth, for regeneration, that is planting seeds before we get to the 2040s. So all those seeds count. All that work is going to mix in with it and give us the lift at the time we need it.
Mm-hmm. Now, how much, that's just brilliantly laid out, and I thank you for it. How did you determine when what happens?
Yes.
My first question.
Yes. So, thank you. So, the book, Choosing Earth, has almost 40 pages of footnotes. This is a deeply, even though it's, I guess, 160 pages, it is a deeply researched book. Mm-hmm. And it draws on these estimations from the National Science Foundation, from the United Nations work, from scholars around the world. It's integrated scholarship from around the world to come to these estimates. And I did not want to present this kind of future early on. This is not where I started. I was pushed again and again to this understanding. And I was hoping, well, we could say we're going to turn the corner, we're going to use technology and our wits, and we're not going to go into a time of unraveling and crash. So it was only, and Colleen could speak to this, but I was very reluctant to come to that point of view, actually. Mm-hmm. And I'm still pushed to come deeply into that perspective. But this is the data from the United Nations and from the scientists of the world. They're saying this is where we're going. And it's deeply, deeply disturbing to me to actually confront this work day in and day out. Sure. And where we're headed. And so because so many people feel, well, we've got a little more time, or well, we can use technology to make this difference, or well, we don't have to make that big a change, do we? And so on. So this is difficult to bridge where we are now with where we're going and the choices that we can make constructively to move into a promising future.
Yes, I hear you. You know, one of the features of your book that sounds so funny, but I enjoyed, was the extensive discussion about the role of grieving. Mm. And, you know, the argument has been made, you two, as you both well know, that grieving has been something that has been struck so much from our society. Even though every single ancient tradition on the planet has a very specified period of grieving in a life cycle, in our modern day, we just don't want to take the time for it. We don't want to take the time for elderly people. We don't want to take the time for burial and death and that process of grieving and all that that means. And I really salute you in taking the time to lay that out in the book. And of course, inside that, you keep talking about opportunity, because in that space of letting go of what's so dear to us, sometimes it's another person, sometimes now it's the planet herself, that we can start to rebuild in a new conscientious way, a new kind of future.
Yes. If we're grieving, there's recognition there. We're not going back to how it used to be. In grief, there's surrender to what is. To say, we better love what's here because we're not going back to the way it used to be. Now, if we can grieve and allow what is true to be true, the reality of what we're confronting, then we can step up with courage and create a new future, new pathway into the future for ourselves that integrates these serious trends that we spoke about at the outset. So, anything about grieving you want to?
Well, just that, the first step with that is to really let ourselves feel what's happening on the planet. It's hard because we're going through a lot. We just, we're still in a pandemic. But when we let in, the destruction to the planet, it's very, very challenging. But when we let that feeling in, when we start little by little, letting it come in, what we come to is so much profound gratitude for this gift that we've been given of the planet. And that brings the energy to want to save it, to want to do everything we can to restore it, to protect it, and to make sure that it's here for future generations.
Yes.
So, but as we, it's the opposite of what we think. We're pushing away. I don't want to feel it, don't want to know it, I can't feel it. But actually we can. We are part of the planet. Of course we can feel it. We are the planet. So as we let it in, we're going to love it. And when we love something, we won't let it die. We will care for it.
Colleen, thank you for that. I think it's so important, and to touch into the space of gratitude, which has such inspiring qualities to it. And it does. It inspires one toward love. I mean, it's a neighbor of love. That's right. That means you want to embrace it. You want to choose it. You want to help it live and beget more, if you will, to be biblical about it. It's just so important. It's so interesting. There's the historical perspective, which you've laid out, historical futuristic in the 20s and the 30s and the 40s and the 50s, et cetera. And then there's, the phenomenological view, which is that at any given moment, anything can change. Absolutely.
That's right.
It's just so interesting that at any given moment along the historical and futuristic trajectory, we can collectively say, okay, I got it, enough. Let's collapse and burn and crash and build today. It's just one of the miracles of life, right?
Right.
So I don't want to be overly enthusiastic about such a change happening where, let's say, the big fossil fuel companies have a moment of awakening and saying, I think we have to go down a different path. So therefore, we're going to divest 99% of what we're doing into green renewable fuels tomorrow. I don't want to be naive, but it is just it tickles you to think that we could come together like that at any moment.
We could.
So would you talk to that a little bit?
Happily. At the outset, I had this quote from Ted Turner and adapted it to say a problem, an opportunity recognized as an opportunity half realized. If we will recognize the opportunity to come together and choose a new future, it's very close. And what I like to do is to share with people the cell phone that they have, because that cell phone is a vehicle of radical transformation. Right now, 60% of people on this planet have access to one of these, and the internet. And that means a majority of us right now could speak to one another about the future that we want and the future we don't want.
Right.
By the end of this decade, 60% is going to grow to 75%. This is growing astonishingly rapidly. And low Earth satellites are being put around the Earth right now, thousands of them, to engage with people in rural areas that currently don't have access to the internet. So you can see why this is going to grow. So we have the tools to communicate if we want it. Do we have the motive? You bet we have the motive. We're going to go into uninhabitability if we don't choose a way of living that is sustainable and surpassing on this planet. So we have a very strong motive. We have the technological tools. What's required is the will to use it. And well, how do you get that? Well, you get Mitchell to come on with his programs and to say, look, we have choice here. It's not
Come on, everybody.
Yeah. If we recognize the opportunity, we can use it and move into that future. So that's how I feel. But this is quite radical. It's to stand outside of nation-state politics to planetary politics of a species politics, if you will. It's a new game that needs to emerge on the Earth.
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. Well, I like to chunk things down to a micro level, sort of like fractal, because when we talk about things like global warming, by and large, it's out of people's grasp. It's too big to really, I keep using the word grok, to cognize.
Yes.
And so I was recently on Earth Day hosting and emceeing an Earth Day event in New York. Well, online, but this time, which I've done for some years. And my talk was about just one's own personal habitat, that we want to keep our homes in order, clean, tidy, neat, organized, orderly. And you really can't even conceive of not having that level of orderliness and cleanliness and respect for one's home. But that's a level on which we can all relate. And then if you tell people, imagine all the books were on the floor and all the videos are scattered everywhere and your clothes are out of their, closets and all, and just forming a big heap. You go, wait a minute, this is madness. No way I'm going to live like this. The toilets are overflowing. There's no water out of the faucet. All of a sudden, the whole story about global warming starts to come home, and anyway, I just wanted to offer that thought. So it becomes very personal all of a sudden. And if we can go from that micro to a larger macro, we may stand a chance to look at what each individual can do to play a role in a new future.
Yes. Yeah, there's so much that we can do. Because we require a whole systems change. Why deep and long? We require a whole systems change.
Yes.
And what does that mean? It means the work, perhaps, that we do, the clothes that we wear, the car that we drive, the home in which we live, the food that we eat. It just goes on and on. Well, you can say, well, I can change my diet. We're talking about that now, eating less meat as a society. The clothes that I wear after the pandemic, people are saying, well, I don't need all those clothes. I see the
sweatshirt too.
Yes. The transportation I use, I can change that towards more fuel. You see, you can just go, it's huge, which means that everyone can find a place where they can play a role. And I say again and again, what we need to find is our true gifts that we can bring to a world in great transition, because we each have different gifts to give. And a musician can have songs that would encourage us, inspire us. An architect would have homes that respond to these kinds of changes. A teacher can have, well, I'm going to teach differently in my school. We each have a role to play here. It's a team effort. It's a community enterprise.
Yes.
So, and with that, we can then begin to look beyond the micro, as you were saying, to more macro. Okay, well, if I'm doing this and this with my life, what are other people going to be doing with their lives, so we can pull together in common cause? So, Colleen.
And that also includes just, how we are together and in community. So that, that's such an important part of it. So there's all the pieces Duane mentioned, and then there's, how are we showing up in humanity with each other, and how can we create it so that more people have opportunity, more people can contribute, in bigger ways, so those inequities can start to come, into more, more collaborative projects. So that's another really big piece to it, just like climate justice, for a long time now, many communities of color, communities of indigenous people have really bared the brunt of climate changes because of where they live and where their land is, and developing countries. And so we really need to recognize that, and especially those of us of privilege that have education or economic privilege, to start recognizing that more sharing needs to happen, way more sharing.
I'd like to ask you, I of course, am wholly aligned with your worldviews and cosmological view as well. And I'm wondering, you laid out a whole trajectory, and I appreciate it, from, the grieving and the falling and the collapsing to the upsurge and all of that. But I don't really want to wait 30 or 40 years. If you can help it. So, with all due respect.
Yeah.
I want to ask you, and I'm just playing with you because who knows, but you've graphed out a possibility that actually has a good level of probability underneath it based on the research you have done and the major depth research. So it's not lightly stated by you very clearly. And at the same time, and there's sort of some glee at the end of the trajectory. So we're all very happy about that. But as I say, we're an impatient species and we don't want to wait. But at the same time, right now, we're sort of in the clutches of the beginning, in some measure, Duane, of the authoritarianism. And I'm just wondering, are there practical suggestions you have in dealing with the current divisiveness that is showing up in all areas of justice reform, prison reform, judicial reform, environmental reform, lifestyle reform? Are there things that you see we could do to avert that part, the authoritarianism part, and come to the freedom part faster?
Yes. Well, indeed there are. And it's so close that it's invisible. And what I mean by that is it was our ability to communicate that got us from awakening hunter-gatherers 10,000 years ago to where we are right now, speaking with one another, potentially at a global scale. Yes. With ease at a global scale. Now, in my mind, as communication goes, so goes the future. As the media goes, so goes the future. Mm-hmm. If I turn on television in the United States, I need to recognize that we are spending about 1 billion person hours every day, 1 billion person hours every day watching television still, even though we have the internet. Now, the question in my mind is, what's happening to us? We are being hypnotized day in and day out, 1 billion person hours a day, into the trance of consumerism, the trance of separation, who's up, who's down, where's the rat race of the human race. And so we are being hypnotized by the global media right now. But we own the airwaves. It's our media. It's us. And if we want to change, let's say, attention to prison reform, to social justice and inequities and all the rest, we can do it. We just have to amp up the kind of creativity that you, Mitchell, are bringing to media and that Colleen is bringing to media, and to have a global awakening of reflective consciousness, because looking at television is an act of consciousness. It's saying, I see you, and you're the mirror in which I can see you, and you're the window in which I look out at the world. This is consciousness happening in what we're doing right now. So my point is, yes, we can do this, and the most powerful thing we can do to raise consciousness is to present the kinds of transformative media in the mass media that we own. Don't just give it up to NBC, ABC, CBS, and Fox. Don't just give it up. Take it back. Take back the airwaves. Use the internet, not just for Facebook and such about me. It's about us. So my point is, yes, we can do it, but we have to step up the game.
From your mouth to God's ears, brother. No, I agree with you completely.
We're counting on you, Mitchell.
I've been saying the same thing
brother.
for years. It's our airwaves, not big pharma's. It's really true. It's really true. One of the points you make in the book that I actually shared with the Earth Day audience that I was hosting was the piece about how many hours per year are covering global warming. And it was enough to make you cry. Do you want to speak to that a little bit?
Well, I mean,
because those statistics are daunting.
It is astonishing that if you put in the United States, CBS, NBC, ABC, and Fox, 4 different major broadcasters, and say, well, look, these guys are paying attention, aren't they? Well, okay, how much time total over a year did they put into informing the public about climate change? 4 of them over a year. Well, about 2 hours. Now, that's there's no way to run a modern democracy facing the kinds of challenges we face. It's no wonder we're drifting into catastrophe. No wonder the world's unraveling. No one's watching. We're watching, the entertainment programs. Forget, the reality programs that are looking because they aren't there. So this is a very, very serious challenge that no one is really recognizing yet. But we must, if we're going to shift this swiftly, in my estimation.
So, Colleen and Duane, I want to bring this up because underneath or behind the puppets on TV, refusing to talk about what's most important. I mean, I sometimes think I'm watching a game show when I watch CNN and MSNBC these days. I can't stand what I see. All I see, honestly, is money going from hand to hand. That's what I see. I see a propaganda machine that they may as well be working for the government. Because, and they're not supposed to, they're supposed to be the 4th pillar, if you will. But behind this puppet game is the FCC, correct?
Yeah, well...
What?
No, it isn't, because what people don't realize is we literally, legally own the airwaves.
True enough.
We own them. It isn't that the FCC gives them to us or that a corporation, a broadcaster gives.
It's like the
to us.
Constitution.
No, it's ours.
Ours.
We own it.
Right.
And hardly anyone knows that we own this. And if we want it to be different, we have the legal right to ask for it to be different. But to make that ask, we have to come together in community to make that ask, because they are responsible to the community, serving the public interest at a community scale. And that's what we did in the 80s. Over 40 years ago, we said, look, we own the airwaves here in the San Francisco Bay Area. We want to use prime time to have a conversation about something that matters, which we did. We want to have a scientific sample of citizens so we can accurately judge how people feel about these things, not just their off-the-cuff opinion. We want to know collectively how we feel. We demonstrated more than 40 years ago, with 300,000 people watching this program, that we could have a dialogue at a community scale. We could do this. It's the social will and the social imagination needs to be mobilized for us to engage in this kind of communication and move rapidly into this more promising future.
I agree. How'd you do it? I mean, doesn't the FCC, you're absolutely completely right. And maybe you and I are some of the few people that really know that about the airwaves. I've been spouting that forever. I said, you understand.
Exactly.
It's ours.
It's ours.
It's ours. Own it.
Yes.
But just as a legal mechanism, wouldn't that orchestration need to take place through the FCC or not necessarily?
No, it does not.
It's direct.
No, there's a constitutional foundation of this. There's a legislative foundation to this. There are rulings of all different kinds. It is unequivocal. It requires the permission of no one except for us, the public, to just surrender to a commercialized mindset and hypnosis. If we want to take back the airwaves, it doesn't require us to go knock on anyone's door and say, please. No, we own it. We own it. It's ours.
I love it. So I guess we have to form yet another organization. Take back the airwaves everywhere.
Yes. So we had Bay Voice at the Bay Area, and we're also very much thinking about Earth Voice. So here every time you turn one of these on, is functionally an Earth Voice because it goes on the internet, and the internet is global for the most part. Yes. So there it is. It doesn't require any miracles of technology or law. It's here right now. It requires the intelligence, the consciousness to use it.
And the commitment.
And the commitment.
Exactly. Very true. Very true. Well, we have covered some really good ground. I want to ask one more question, if I may. And we've kind of covered it, but I want to get it a little bit more nailed down. And that is, you said that climate change or global warming is but one part of the larger picture of the consciousness that needs to change to move us forward. Could you, both of you, say something about that so I can, the audience can really get that larger holistic perspective?
Are you thinking of the change in consciousness or the integration across areas?
Both.
Oh, okay. Mm-hmm. Well, I'll just speak to that briefly. Mm-hmm. We're in a time that requires a change of the whole system. And we can start anywhere in the system, but if we start with climate change, most people recognize it. Mm-hmm. With climate change, we're going to, with every degree Celsius that we go up in temperature, agricultural productivity drops by roughly 15%. Now, if we go at the end of the century, the Trump administration thought we'd go up by 4 degrees Celsius. Many feel that way. And that means there would be a 60% drop in agricultural productivity on the planet. At the same time, we're at 7 billion people now, moving towards 9 billion. And if we have a drop in agricultural productivity and an increase in temperature, it means famine. And with famine, it means conflict. So we're looking at a world for then connecting the dots. With famine, there's going to be a conflict, and people are going to be moving away from conflict like they have been doing in the Middle East. It took 1 million
refugees.
Yes, climate refugees. It took 1 million climate refugees to destabilize the politics of Europe. And we are looking at not 1 million, but billions. Potentially 3 billion people is a rough estimate, 3,000 times that impacted Europe. So now we start looking down the road. So then we have climate refugees, and then we have cultural conflicts and transformation underway as a consequence of that. At the same time that's going on, we are disrupting and in effect crashing ecosystems, the ecosystems of the land as well as the water. I won't go into that, but those ecosystems, it goes beyond agricultural productivity to creating an ecosystem on the water that's really habitable for jellyfish and on the land for cockroaches. And so we're creating two ecosystems that are radically outside that which would be sustainable and supportive of human population. So we can just keep going around this circle of system dynamics and see, whoa, everything impinges upon everything else. We have to take care of the whole system or we're in big trouble.
And, and maybe the connection on the community level is that, again, looking back at the 3 pathways, what seeds can we plant now as we go further into the contractions of this initiation and awakening that's happening to us, that's really waking us up to being here on behalf of all life. So those seeds that we can plant now are going to be so important, because as all those things are happening, it really will come down to a choice of how do we want to be with it. It's going to be a crisis. We're not going to avoid the crisis, but how we respond to it will make it all the difference. And so, laying a foundation and planting seeds for connection and community, for more equity and sharing now, for looking at how we're living, for recognizing the gift, the gratitude that you brought up, the gift of what we have. Those need to start happening now in a big, big way. To help us make that.
Yes, right. That reminds me, Colleen, of another feature of the work that the two of you are doing, which is the voices of the indigenous people. Yeah. And it's such a kick in the you-know-what, because, we hold ourselves as a culture to be the most modern and the most advanced and the most technologically advanced and the smartest that has come down the pike. But the more I look, the less true I see that is. And we don't even have to go to ancient Egypt or ancient China or Atlantis, for that matter, to see major technological development that has long preceded what we have now. But just to go back to the indigenous people who we as a collective have so dismissed, and now it's like their intelligent words and wisdom are ringing in our ears as really a blueprint of where we are now and where we're going, if. Could you just talk a bit about that? Because it was really a seminal point in the book as well.
I'd be honored to, actually. At the heart of the indigenous wisdom, as I understand it, is an appreciation of the universe as being alive. They may put it in different terms, saying a great wind blows through the universe, animating, bringing to a life everything that exists. To me, that great wind that blows through it all is consciousness. So there's a life force that was recognized and that was integral to everyday life for indigenous cultures. And so they would say, well, there are three miracles. The first miracle is that there's anything here at all. The second miracle is that there are living things that exist that know. The second miracle, is plants and animals, life that exists. And the third miracle is there are living things that know they exist with a reflective consciousness. And we say, well, that's us. And like you just said, we take that to be the extraordinary miracle of us, and we forget the first miracle of life, that there's anything here at all. And science and wisdom traditions are now coming together to say, this does look like the universe is a superorganism. The whole thing is alive, and then there are life forms that emerge within the aliveness, life within life within life. Now that transforms the journey. It says we're not separate beings in a material universe. We're together in a superorganism, and we're all growing together. So let's recognize the unity of it all, the aliveness that infuses the whole thing, and let's grow together, learning how to live in this living universe. And that's the indigenous understanding brought to a planetary scale.
Beautiful. Just beautiful. I think it's just so important to keep that truly upfront and personal in our lives. We feel the organic intelligence of these words, and it's the thing that can keep reminding us. And for me, their deep, abiding love and respect for Mother Nature, as a living being.
Yes.
Has been a guide for me for so long.
Yes.
A living being.
That's right.
I so laugh often at people who don't see it that way. They see it as a bunch of rock. And I say, well, don't you realize that everything that you have and everything that you are is from Mother Earth? Is that mysterious? It's really not. It's just, it's true. My food, my air, my water, my everything. Yeah. That's right. Your mother.
Yes. Yes.
In closing, I'd love to hear Colleen and Duane just share with our audience just a few closing words that you would like us to live with and continue on with.
Well, I guess for me, maybe I go first. Just to say, what we've really learned is it comes, again, back to community. And that part of this journey that we're in right now is to recognize how much we need each other. And if there's, I think, any wisdom that we would want to give to viewers is that we've learned community is important for learning about this. We have study groups, and we've really seen how the collective wisdom of the group learning together is so important. And so forming community on all levels, and then developing your own inner resources, however that is for you, that those two really go hand in hand. And then those help you come into a relationship with all other beings here and all other life here and the planet and the universe as a whole. So with the support of community, with the support of your own inner growth and development, then we can enter into it. But the community part is so crucial for right now. This is not a time to go it alone. It's to come together. We need each other and collaboration, and everyone's gifts matter. So it's really a time for that.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much, Colleen.
Yeah.
It's a very important point. Really.
I just honor what Colleen just said. She said it beautifully. This is a team effort. We're beyond times for the individual hero to step forward. This is time for the whole planetary community to come together. and to realize we got to work together to make this a habitable future for ourselves. And it's a kind of love and mutual regard that Colleen was speaking about, and that's fundamental to the work that we're doing.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it. You know, you remind me of a phrase I heard that is attributed to Reverend Jesse Jackson. We all may have taken different boats here, but we're all in the same boat now.
Yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's right.
Yeah.
Well said.
Yeah.
Well, thank you both for being guests today and sharing your wisdom, your intelligence, your deep caring about our planet, about all sentient life, and your hard work and scholarship in bringing forward what you have in this book, Choosing Earth, and the film. It's just a real gift to humanity. Talk about gifts.
And you're a real brother. You're a brother on this path. So thank you, Mitchell.
Yeah. Thank you for your work.
My pleasure. My pleasure. We'll have you on again.
Okay, great.
This is Mitchell J. Rabin for A Better World. I hope you got as much out of that as I did. I am so grateful to these two who have done, their life has been dedicated to this purpose of helping to wake humanity up and bring us to another operating level so we can consciously and with respect and love move into a future that we really would like to have. So on that note, thank you so much for joining us today, and I look forward to seeing you all next week.